Hi, Martin here, and I've got another new video for you on the ongoing topic of education and empowerment for working with 5-MeO DMT. This video that I want to make today is on the importance of embodied bilateral symmetry and how this impacts the 5-MeO DMT experience, and also how embodied bilateral symmetry is clearly and definitively correlated with full non-dual opening and experience when working with 5-MeO DMT. Now, to introduce this topic, I think it's safe to say that most people who choose to work with 5-MeO DMT are doing it because they are hoping that they're going to have an experience that might fit into this category of this divine grace experience, where you take your 5-MeO DMT, your ego, your sense of separate, individuated self, gently dissolves or even rapidly dissolves, and you lose track of your individual identity and that sense of separation between subject and object, me and not me, me and the world. All of that dissolves into this infinite state of absolute unity and interconnectedness that is also perceived as infinite, eternal, and intimately aware, conscious, and alive, and comprised of the energy of pure, unconditional love. In religious language, this is often what is called a mystical experience. It can also be likened to an enlightenment experience, this sense of pure knowing that this is the true reality. This is the true nature of being. It is unitary. There is no separation. There is no subject-object. There's no this, that, or the other thing. There's just this pure sense of divine unity with everything, and it is also experienced directly as the fundamental nature of the self. So that's the non-dual experience. And again, it's often described in sort of these more mystical, sort of spiritual, religious kind of terms. Now, because it has these, quote, spiritual qualities, it's easy to come to the, in my opinion, the mistaken conclusion that your ability, your spirituality as an individual is going to have some kind of direct impact or correlation or causation within your 5-MeO DMT experience. So put another way, if you're, quote, more spiritual, you're, quote, more likely to have this full non-dual mystical experience with 5-MeO DMT. I actually think that that is a fundamentally incorrect assumption. And one of the things that I've been saying for many, many years about 5-MeO DMT is that this molecule actually reveals that this entry into the non-dual state and this mystical absorption is more an energetic issue than it is a spiritual issue. And that because it is energetic in nature, that it can happen to someone who has no sense of being spiritual whatsoever, and also because spirituality is often tied in with people's egoic sense of their own identity and their belief systems and their values and their meaning making. Sometimes people who identify as rather spiritual, they might actually have a more difficult time entering into the full non-dual state than someone who says, look, I have no spiritual or religious beliefs whatsoever. So when we look at it as an energetic issue, we can start to reframe what's really going on here, and then also what is actually important in a session with 5-MeO DMT. Now, the title of this article, or excuse me, not this article, of this video, is that symmetry is the key to entering into the full non-dual state in 5-MeO DMT. And that's what I'm going to be arguing for here and explaining this for all of you. But we can start with, maybe you've experienced 5-MeO DMT, maybe you've had a chance to observe others who experience 5-MeO DMT, and maybe you've noticed this. But for people who take 5-MeO DMT and then later report that they had a full non-dual experience, this divine grace experience, they were absorbed into a unitary state, and it was just this overflowing sense of oceanic unconditional love. Maybe you've noticed that they all do the same thing in their body. So let's imagine I'm taking a hit of 5-MeO. I take my hit, and then I start to feel this incredible outrush of energy, just expanding infinitely, infinitely. And the body opens up like this. People open their arms. You can't see my legs, but their legs open up. And this is often called the Vitruvian man position. So if you know the drawing by Da Vinci of the guy standing there in the circle with his arms and legs open, it's also just referred to as spread eagle position or the starfish position. This is what people automatically do. Their bodies just open up and they go into these symmetrical positions. And when that happens, there's still a number of different things that might occur at that point. Some people will just be fully absorbed in that state and they won't move, and they will be in that position for a number of minutes. It might be just a couple minutes. It could be 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And even if they're not moving at all, at some point, the conscious structures of the ego will start to come back online. And you'll be able to observe that in the person because they might have been lying there, but then suddenly they look up and they look around, or they start to notice other people who are present in the room, or they start doing something. So you can see, well, you were fully absorbed, but now the ego is back operating and now you're doing something, that the character of the ego has returned. Now it's also possible that people can go into these symmetrical positions in the body, and then there might be a lot of movement taking place. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but it's important to note that it's the symmetry that's important, not whether there is stillness or whether there is movement, because there can be a lot of movement in the non-dual state that is not filtered through the ego and is not related to our normal sense of self and other, me and not me, me and the world. So I want to spend some time explaining all of this from a variety of different angles, but that's the gist of it. The gist is that embodied bilateral symmetry is the key indicator that someone is actually going to have a full non-dual experience with 5-MeO DMT. And the opposite side of that is if we are able to observe any kind of asymmetries taking place within somebody's 5-MeO experience, and if they never go into a fully embodied bilaterally symmetrical position, they didn't go all the way. They didn't go into the non-dual experience, and that the ego was there and active, either in a conscious or unconscious form in some manner, and it was maintaining some kind of control over the individual and was dominant during the experience. So, I've said this many times. If you've watched my videos, listened to my talks, read my books, you've heard all of this before, but I'm going to repeat it anyway, just in case you, the viewer, are brand new to this. So the ego is a collection of energetic patterns which are embodied. It's not something abstract. It doesn't exist out there in the ethers. All of the energies of the ego are here in the body, and that through habit and time, we associate with various patterns of energy, and we identify with them, and collectively, taken all together, all these patterns of energy create the character of our sense of self. But this sense of self is not merely self-referential. It's not just about me. My ego is not just about me, because the ego also creates a sense of what is not the self and the contextual relationship between the self and not the self simultaneously. So in other words, the ego isn't created in a vacuum. The ego always comes in the context of the wider world. And this includes family relationships, culture, society, ethnicity, political leanings, musical tastes, all of that, and how we interact with the objects of the world. These are all determined through our egos. Now, the ego also is almost always embodied through asymmetries. And this is just because that's how we navigate the world of subject and object. There's nothing particularly deep about this in any way, shape, or form. And so I'll just give a couple really easy demonstrations. Well, first of all, most of us are handed, meaning we're either left-handed or we're right-handed. And then some of us are ambidextrous. I myself, I'm somewhere a little bit in between. I'm not fully ambidextrous, meaning that I can't interchangeably do the same things with my left and right hands, but half of the things that I do are left-handed, the other half are right-handed. But most people are predominantly right-handed, then a small portion of the population is left-handed, and an even smaller portion of the population is fully ambidextrous. But now, if I, the subject, Martin, want to take some notes, I am going to grab my pen with my left hand, and then maybe I'll hold my notebook with my right hand. And then I will use the pen to take some notes and to write something down. So I, the subject, again, Martin, am engaging with an object to do and accomplish something in the world of subject and object. It's basic. I'm not going to use both hands and write. That would be kind of weird. I'm not going to use my right hand because I don't write right-handed, so I'm going to do it with my left hand. So it's an asymmetry. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally normal. That's how we engage the world. If I want to grab my microphone, I'm going to reach over here with my left hand because that's where my microphone is. And again, I know what the microphone is. That the microphone and the pen, these are actually part of my ego because I know how to use it. I know what it is. It's not a mystery object to me. It's a part of my sense of self that I'm engaging in this interplay between subject and object, self and world. Another example, if I want to drink some water, which also I know what water is, I have a concept of that and how I relate to that. So the water is also a part of my ego. I'm going to reach over with my right hand because my water glass is over here. If I want to use my phone, I'm going to reach over with my right hand because it's over here to my right. So as we're just going about our day and we're engaging with these constant subject-object relationships and contextual realities in duality, we're always engaged in various forms of asymmetry. That's just how the ego is embodied. Or if I want to look at my dog, I'm going to look over there, and then actually I'm going to have to walk over here because she's on the other side of the couch. I can't see her. I got to walk over here. Look at, like, oh yeah, there's the dog over there. So it's asymmetrical. Okay? This is totally basic. This is how we engage the objects of the world, how we embody ourselves, and how I navigate the world of subject and object, and how you do too. We all do this. Okay? Now, it's also important to recognize that the ego also has internal structures, meaning that through our ego and our sense of our own self-identity and our beliefs and our values and our thoughts and our ideas, we are constantly dividing things internally between I believe this, I don't believe that. I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. I'll show this, I'm going to hide this, right? So we're always dividing things internally, and then we act it out in terms of how we're interacting with other people, how we're presenting ourselves, how we're allowing our energy to be embodied and expressed, and how we're engaging with the objects of the world. Okay. Now, it's also important to recognize that the ego has many different layers to it. So we have the surface conscious layers of the ego, and then we also have lots of unconscious structures within the ego, where we are experiencing cascades of thoughts and emotions and behaviors, but we're not fully consciously aware of it, and so we keep recreating the same dynamic that we consciously say, I don't like this dynamic, but I keep doing it. I keep recreating this for some reason, or I'm sabotaging myself or undermining myself, or I'm not choosing in alignment with my highest values. And then we also have various survival aspects of the ego that can come online in a traumatic or a dangerous situation, which leads to behaviors and activities that are identified in trauma therapy as flight, fight, freeze, or fawn, where we engage in different embodiments and different activities. Again, not necessarily at a conscious level. We're not choosing it at the conscious level, but the unconscious is saying, hey, I've got to enact this strategy right now because my survival is important for it. Okay, so again, the ego is just a collection of patterns of energy that we embody and live out and express. And through the requirements of subject-object relationship in the dualistic world, it's almost always embodied and acted out asymmetrically, meaning more to the left, more to the right, depending on what it is that we're doing and how we're engaging the objects of experience. And then also these unconscious patterns can also be expressed through these various forms of asymmetry, and then we're also internally categorizing things on different sides all the time. Okay, so that's the human ego. So the human ego is embodied, and here we can start to talk about human anatomy. The human body, as with many forms of life, is basically bilaterally symmetrical, meaning that if we cut me in half all the way along the center line of my body, the left and right sides of the body fundamentally mirror each other with the same kind of structures. Now, it's not perfectly symmetrical. Like maybe you've done the thing where you take half of your face in a photo and then you flip it to create a full face, and then you notice like, oh, that doesn't really look like me. It looks a little weird. So that most of us are not perfectly symmetrical, but overall structure, we have a bilaterally symmetrical body. Left and right sides mirror each other. They're not identical, they are mirror images of each other, these two sides of the body. And we can see that a lot of our internal structures and anatomical structures follow this. So we have two primary hemispheres of the brain, right? Left and right side. We have two eyes, we have two nostrils, we have two ears, only one mouth. But we have two sides of the mouth that mirror each other, right? The teeth come together right here, and then they mirror each other, so it actually has two sides to it. And then the basic muscular system of the body, again, mirrored bilateral symmetry. We have four chambers of the heart, two on the bottom, two on the top, two on the bottom. We have these two lungs, and then we get down to the sexual organs, where we also have two sides, and we've got two ovaries, we've got two testes, we've got two sides of the penis, we have two sides of the vulva. So we have this basic bilaterally symmetrical body structure, anatomy. Now, not all living beings have bilaterally symmetrical bodies. Some have radial symmetrical bodies. So if you think of like a sea anemone, right? It's kind of like a flower, opens up and it's got all these little tentacles, and it's basically round. And that it doesn't have a left or a right side because it's based on a circular form. Or if we look at a round flower, that it doesn't have a left or right side. Some flowers do have bilateral symmetry, like orchids, things like that. A lot of flowers just open up and they have radial symmetry within their structure. Then if we get into things like trees and plants or coral, we tend to see fractal branch symmetry, meaning that their anatomy is structured so that there's not a left and a right side, there's not a front and a back, and also there's not these radial forms of symmetry of everything coming out equally from the center, but we see these branches that tend to rotate up within the overall structure of the system. And then, of course, as complex living beings, most living beings have various forms of radial symmetry, fractal branch symmetry, and also bilateral symmetry, all combined into one anatomical unit. So for example, if you look at my eyes, look deep into my eyes, you will see that they have radial symmetry, but they are positioned to have bilateral symmetry because I've got two of them. I don't just have one eye, I've got two of them, but they exhibit radial symmetry in their immediate structure, but then they are structured within the body with bilateral symmetry. Also, human bodies have a fractal branch symmetry as well. So from the two hemispheres of the brain, we get the nervous system, which has these fractal branches all throughout the body, connecting all the areas of the body to the central processing unit of the brain. And then similarly in the cardiovascular system connected to the heart and the lungs, we have veins that go all the way through the body and they create these fractal branch patterns. So as human beings, we have all three of these kinds of symmetry present in our anatomy, but the dominant feature of our bodies is this nice mirrored bilateral symmetry between the left and right sides, where if we cut ourselves in half, the two sides fundamentally mirror each other. okay? And all of this is stacked on this central column. So again, if we go back to this idea of what happens if someone energetically opens up all the way, we're going to see that happen. Like if I were just to raise one arm up like this, you would probably say, hey, you're not open all the way because that's open all the way. And also, it's important to recognize that just because a body shows mirrored bilateral symmetry also doesn't mean that it's opened up all the way. So for example, let's say I take some 5-MeO and then I'm overcome with a sense of personal grief or loss. I might do something like this and kind of bend down where I'm closing down in my energy and like maybe I'm starting to sob. It's also very easy to read. We could say, hey, you're not actually open because you're closing down, you're pulling in. Or another example would be I take a hit of 5-MeO and I lie back and I'm open, but then I get scared so that I'm starting to pull in like this and you can see the tension rise in my body, my hands are gripped, and then I'm starting to shake. That's not open. So just because someone is exhibiting bilateral symmetry doesn't mean that they're open, doesn't mean that they're releasing all the way into the experience. And again, the non-dual experience, the full non-dual absorption, is associated with a full release and openness within the experience. Okay? So, assuming that these energetic structures of the ego are going to dissolve. Well, first, actually, let's just talk about gamma rays for a second. So, most of the time when we're operating in the world, we are in alpha waves, which is just relaxed presence, or we're in beta, where we're kind of agitated, like, oh no, I got to do something, got to fix something. And then we also have delta and theta waves, and those are more associated with deep relaxation, sleep, and dreaming. But we have something very special once we get to the, quote, full release dose of 5-MeO DMT, which is fundamentally distinct from low and moderate doses of 5-MeO DMT. What happens at that point is that the brain goes into gamma waves. Now, gamma waves are the highest energy, most coherent waves of energy that the human brain can produce. Most people don't experience gamma waves through most of their lives. This is a very rarefied brain state. Again, we go through alpha and beta, delta and theta pretty much every day. We go through those as through our sleep and waking cycles, through our agitation, through our relaxation, but gamma is very, very different. Okay, my attempt at a one-take video got disrupted by the dog barking, but I'm back. I was talking about gamma waves. So, in the non-dual state produced by 5-MeO DMT, the brain is going into gamma waves. And as I was saying, these are the highest energy, most coherent brainwave states that our brains can go into. And what happens when we go into gamma waves is that what is now called the, quote, default mode network of the habitual patterns of neurons firing in our brains that are associated with our sense of self, our sense of memory, our sense of spatial relations, the way that we engage in objects, the way that we engage with others, the ways that we present ourselves energetically to the world through the character of the ego. Unlike with other psychedelics, where the default mode network gets disrupted and reorganized, when we go into gamma waves on 5-MeO DMT, the default mode network dissolves entirely. It is completely overridden by this global phenomenon of gamma waves in the brain. Also, at this time on 5-MeO, when we go into these states, there's also this experience of everything energetically opening up and going into this highly coherent state where, again, there is no resistance, there's no subject and object, there's no holding on, there's no individual identity present. It's this global total phenomenon which is highly energetically charged. And this is the non-dual experience on 5-MeO DMT. Now, also what happens when this occurs is that eyesight tends to get locked straight ahead, where the eyes don't deviate from this center line, or they might roll up into the head like that. And people might also close their eyes. They're not looking at anything. But eyesight is just locked into this nice symmetrical form. Versus, for example, if someone is suddenly triggered with fear and there's fight or flight or panic setting in, they're going to be looking around. Their body's going to be really agitated, like, oh my God, what's happening? What do I do? And that's the ego. That's the ego resisting the energy of the experience and holding on some way. Also, quite significantly, here actually, I'm going to back up a minute. So notice when you get agitated or when you get upset emotionally, our breath changes. And we might breathe more shallowly, or we might hyperventilate, or we might overbreathe, or we do a lot of pushing and pulling with our breath when we're struggling, when we're emotionally charged, breathing like that. Now, as a hack on your emotional state and your reactivity, you can consciously choose to relax your breath and breathe further into your body and further into your abdomen down in here. And if you do that without trying to fix your emotional state, it will then shift because your nervous system is getting different information. So this bilateral symmetry in the body works the same way with the highly charged energetic event of 5-MeO-DMT at the full release dose level, where if we can engage in relaxed bilateral symmetry in the body, we are more likely to override the habitual structures and reactions of the ego and make it much more difficult for these patterns of the ego to manifest and take hold, and therefore we are more likely to enter into the non-dual state. Now, again, when somebody does go into the non-dual state, there's this automatic entry into this open, relaxed symmetry. Breathing at that point becomes very, very relaxed and very shallow, to the degree that an outside observer might think that the person has stopped breathing. They haven't. They just have this very, very relaxed breath that's taking place. And also, there is no eyesight of looking around, and we can see that there's this nice openness within the body. Now, as I mentioned at the top of this video, that the full non-dual absorption is not necessarily correlated with stillness in this state. It can be. Some people will just go out, they won't move for 15 minutes, and then 15 minutes later, their ego comes back and suddenly they're moving and they're looking around, and maybe they're talking, maybe they're trying to engage with others. But for others who go into this relaxed non-dual state with bilateral symmetry in their body, one of the things that's very common, and maybe you've seen this, maybe you've experienced this, would be big sort of pinwheel motions with the arms, and the legs can be going as well. And if somebody is on the floor, they can roll onto their back and onto their shoulders. Their legs go up and their legs come down, and then they might sit up and they move forward. And there's these big motions that are taking place. And then for others that are even more finely in line with the energy, then it becomes these rolling over motions, these undulating rolling over motions. Happens in the arms. The feet can't really do that, but the legs are usually going at the same time. And there might also be energy kind of undulating up and down the spine, so the body is moving like this. Now, when these movements occur, because there's no ego there, in general, people don't know that they're doing this. They don't know that their body is responding this way. And often it is the case that the ego will start to come back and people will catch themselves and realize like, oh, I was moving. But then you can see they're looking at their hands and they're realizing, I don't know how I was just moving. And for those who retain an awareness of it, it's a pretty good analogy to say, especially the arms and the legs are kind of like high pressure fire hoses that nobody's holding on to, and they're just wildly whipping around all on their own. But notice that these motions and movements, they're all taking place in this bilateral symmetry. And you can see this where hands will come together on the center line, and then they'll open up from here. but they don't cross this line. People don't go like this. They come together, they roll, they move, and then they open up like that. And it might be punctuated with times of stillness. People get into different positions. There also might be a lot of sounds and toning that occur during this time period. There can be the glossolalia, the energy language, speaking in tongues kind of phenomenon. And then it's also possible that people get into highly charged states of energetic and emotional processing, but it's all being filtered through these symmetrical body structures, postures, and movements. Sometimes the descriptions are, wow, that looked like that was some kind of exorcism or something like that, as people are releasing and moving through sometimes very challenging, very demanding, physically very demanding energies. And those might not be fully the non-dual state, because there can be a sense of, wow, this energy has really got me. But it shows that the ego is not interfering, because again, when the ego is present, it tends to exhibit these various forms of asymmetry. So when the ego is resisting, and keep in mind, again, that there are conscious and unconscious layers and structures of the ego. That just because the conscious part of the ego says, yeah, I want to let go, I want to open up all the way, it doesn't mean that all those unconscious layers of the ego are going to agree to that. And so there's all kinds of ways that the ego might be involved. And again, we tend to see this play out through various forms of asymmetries. So when there is resistance, and there's a lack of relinquishing of control, or there's an agitation, or there's a fear, or there's a lack of relaxation within the body, we can see there's tightness that occurs. Again, it might be symmetrical, but there's a tightness. Kind of the most dramatic form of that would be then moving out of alignment and going into a fetal position and curling up in a highly protective energetic stance within the body. There can be a lot of thrashing from side to side, a lot of alternating movements, first to the left, then to the right, or people might roll wildly. First they roll this way, then they roll that way, or they might roll forward. But there tends to be a lot of chaotic energetic embodiment when there's some form of egoic resistance taking place. And again, most of this is deeply unconscious. People don't know that they're doing it. They don't know how to stop it. They're not really in charge. These are unconscious aspects of the ego that are acting out in this highly, highly charged energetic state where the ego is threatened with complete dissolution. It's also really common when people are resisting, even at a minor level, that they're going to be looking around. So you might see somebody take a hit and they kind of go back and relax, but then you can see they're, oh, and you can see it in their body language. They're starting to act it out. They're like, oh, I'm scared, or what's that over there? That they're not locked into open and dissolve. They're engaged in some kind of doing. So this is another way you can tell. If somebody looks like they're, quote, doing something and there's asymmetrical body movements taking place, that's a guarantee. The ego is there. The ego is present. And again, this isn't to blame anyone, because these unconscious structures of the ego, they're just trying to protect the person. They're just acting out. It's not a conscious choice. It's not something that they have any volitional control over. It's just a reaction that's taking place. People also might try and get away. Sometimes people get up and they literally try and run away. They might start fighting with other people who are present. They might start acting out various unconscious egoic patterns and structures. The ego can also create 100% projections of what's taking place within the space, and then the ego can interact with those projections as though it's actually happening and it's really present and really taking place. Also tends to be very highly agitated, really chaotic. There's a lot of holding on to the breath, a lot of pushing and pulling, a lot of struggle, a lot of eyes looking around, a lot of closing down, trying to avoid. But there's not that full relaxation and opening into the non-dual state and into this embodied bilateral symmetry. So here's the advice that I always give everyone, is that this can be very difficult to monitor or maintain or consciously engage with with a full release dose of 5-MeO DMT. It's very, very hard because you are not in control. Maybe the unconscious structures of your ego are in control, but you're not consciously in control of those. So the idea is, as a energetic body hack, you should always start your 5-MeO DMT experience with bilateral symmetry. No cross limbs, that includes your legs. Don't be sitting there with your legs crossed, taking a hit. You want your legs to be open. They can be in a diamond position. They can be out front, in front of you. You can be sitting on your knees if you want. And you don't want to be crossed like this. You don't want to be like this. You don't want to be holding your hands. You want to take your hit and then use that body posture. It's like the breathing hack, right? Remember, relax your breath. And also, the breath is one of the last places that the ego lets go, and it's one of the first places it grabs a hold. So you want to relax your breath, breathe easy, open up your body, and relax. That's the best you can do. And if you're lucky, the conscious and unconscious structures of your ego are completely going to dissolve, and you'll have a beautiful divine grace experience, and it's going to be fantastic. But these other aspects of your ego might need to act out during the experience. So what I always tell everyone, as a rule of thumb, when you become aware that you are not embodying yourself with open, relaxed bilateral symmetry, return to what I call the neutral position, which is, oh, I just realized that I was freaking out and I was flailing about. And if I'm aware of that, then I want to lie down and go into this neutral position where the left and right sides of my body mirror each other. And if I'm breathing really hard, like relax the breath, bring it all the way in, and let the body relax. And then there's the possibility that the ego might start to dissolve again. So when you notice, oh, I'm looking around, then look straight ahead. If you notice, oh, I'm flailing from side to side, return to symmetry. Come back to your center. Relax into the neutral position. Now, this also applies on what I call the backside. And the backside is once the energy of the 5-MeO has started to wear down to a sufficient degree, the habitual energetic structures and patterns of the ego will automatically start to reassemble themselves, and the ego will start to come back online. And if it was just the conscious part of the ego that went offline, it was all unconscious stuff that was acting out, well, then the conscious part will come back online. If the ego was 100% completely dissolved, then all of those structures will start to come back, usually in a series of layers, not like all at once, but various layers they start to come back on. Now, at this time, you actually have, in most instances, another 10 or 15 minutes before you get all the way back down to baseline and the effects of the 5-MeO DMT wear off. Now, this is an opportunity that honestly most people miss, because when the ego comes back, they start automatically operating from it. So, for example, take my hit, I'm out, totally absorbed, my ego comes back, and my ego says, whoa, what's happening, what's happening? Oh, water. I know what water is. I'm going to drink water. Whoa, I'm so parched. Whoa, what's going on? Whoa, who are you? What's happening? Right? Just examples of the ego acting out. So this puts a lot of responsibility on the client, where when your ego comes back, always remember it's a choice for you to act from the ego, or you can just relax back into symmetry and observe, like, oh, there's the ego coming back. The ego is freaking out. The ego is trying to get me to drink water right now. The ego is trying to get me to reach out and talk to the people who served me. My ego is trying to say, hey, man, this is all done. Let's finish. Let's wrap this up. Let's be done. But if you can go back into the symmetrical position and just relax, let go of the breath again, you actually have the opportunity for those structures of the ego to dissolve again, and then they'll come back. But if you stay symmetrical and relaxed, they'll dissolve again, and then they'll come back. And it might do that 10, 15 times over the next 10 or 15 minutes. And at that point, you actually get a lot more opportunity to observe how the habitual structures of the ego function, what they try and rope you into doing, and then choosing, I'm going to continue to relax and surrender and allow this energetic openness to continue. Now, this is also why it's very, very helpful to work with a facilitator who is aware of all of these things so that they can help coach you through the experience and remind you, come back to symmetry, come back to center, relax your breath, keep your eyesight focused. All of these little things. In the depth of the experience, there's not a lot of coaching anyone can do because the conscious part of the ego is offline, but it's on the way up and then on the way back down on the backside. There actually is a lot of room for coaching. It's something that clients and facilitators can have conversations with about, well, if I get out of symmetry, could you help reposition me so that I'm more symmetrical and more open? And once we really start looking at it this way, we just more and more acutely can understand that this full non-dual absorption experience, again, is more of an energetic issue that is embodied and demonstrated through the habitual actions and gestures and movements and postures of the body than it is a spiritual issue. It's not a matter of praying more. It's not a matter of believing the right things. It's not a matter of meditating more. It's not a matter of doing more breathwork exercises. It's not about eating the right food or going to the right church or listening to the right podcasts or anything like that. That this is an energetic issue, and that what we want to do is become really aware of how am I embodying myself? Where am I unconsciously acting out the various structures of my ego? Where am I engaging in asymmetries? And then where can I relax and maintain relaxed open awareness in this embodied symmetrical state so that I can move beyond the ego effectively? And then get the opportunity to observe as the ego starts to come back and reform and try and take hold. And then we become more and more consciously aware of how the unconscious asymmetrical structures of the ego are constantly running, and how we're always going into these cascades of perception, experience, thought, reaction, emotional response, gestural response, tone of voice, how we're embodying ourselves, facial expressions, all of that. So that if we're relaxing into symmetry, we're using this as a biostructural hack to allow that energy to open up all the way and go into the unitary state of unconditional love and full non-dual absorption. It's just a different way of looking at it. It's a different way of understanding it. And once you appreciate these differences, I guarantee you, you can watch anyone's 5-MeO DMT experience, and you'll start to be able to really clearly distinguish, okay, this person is now out of their ego, this person is resisting, here the ego is acting out, this energy is closing down, there is resistance, there is fear. All of this becomes very, very obvious because it's all enacted in the body. We can see it taking place, and it correlates to what we are allowing internally in terms of completely letting go and dissolving those structures of the ego in order to have a deep and meaningful non-dual experience. So I think that's all I have to say about that right now. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope this makes some sense to you. I've got more videos about this here on my YouTube channel. Of course, I write all about it in my books. But just thought it'd be good to just make a nice, clear, succinct educational video for you, the viewer, on this absolutely fundamental topic. And again, embodied bilateral symmetry is the key to opening up all the way on 5-MeO DMT. It's that simple. It really is.